While I was browsing the factions deciding which one to play next, I came across this one that I hadn't seen before. Rome. A mighty and powerful people, organized, disciplined, and ready to conquer. Veni vidi vici. As it turns out, Tyrion happened to be a Roman all along. He just had stick-on elf ears, and now has revealed his true form and brought his true army to bear. Roman soldiers, and apparently a phoenix. But this is 100% historically accurate, so we have to get rid of the phoenix. We do have a caster, which we will keep for now, because some of these spells are kind of like inspiration from the Romans' favorite form of magic. Shouting! But of course, nobody in their right mind would want to spend time near High Elves in Ulthuan, so our goal here is to get over to Italia, or at least the closest thing we have in Warhammer, which is Italia, currently conquered by some smelly vampirates and the Greeks, randomly. Where did they come from? So our goal is to come and take this land and reclaim it in the name of Rome. But to do this, we are going to need an army, so we will need a province in Ulthuan. So we're going into our first battle, and Tyrion, like all the great Roman generals of history, came to battle with a fire sword. Now, in the earlier days of the Roman army, they fought in a phalanx formation, which they learned from the Greeks. They'd be in this kind of square formation with spear and shield, and you put a bunch of those next to each other, and you've got a pretty tough, heavy, big wall that the enemy is going to struggle to get through. However, the Romans found, much like the Greeks and much like I'm finding here, that a phalanx formation is easily flanked and isn't very maneuverable over certain terrain, which is why they got rid of it. Here I'm using my javelins, though I'm using my cavalry, so a little bit of extra help to get the W. With this victory, I move on to take the second settlement in this province, and then on to the third as well. I did fight this battle to get the best results, but I used pretty much the same tactics as before. My army is growing though, so that's 3 settlements of the province in the bag, and on to the fourth one. A nice, easy, decisive victory. Auto-resolve. First province, done. We have captured it. Now, some of the unit names here, like Roman soldiers' swords, aren't quite accurate enough for this 100% historically accurate video, so I'm going to name my cheapest swordsman Hastati. More on them in a bit, and I'm also going to rename my Centurion cavalry, which is a strong cavalry, to Equites. Now, before I sail off to retake Italia, I noticed that there's a bit of a vampirate problem in the region, and I worry that it's going to be a problem for me if I'm not defending here. So I take it upon myself to knock this faction down a peg or two, taking out a few of their settlements, claiming them as my own, raising this last one, and then hoping that the High Elves will maybe finish off these 2 above so I don't have to do all the work around here, but entrusting an elf to do a Roman's job is a risky business. I decided around this time as well to recruit a second lord so that I could make my own little independent cohort, although the numbers are going to be slightly off. Let me give you a rough idea of how the Roman army was organized. A single Roman soldier was called a legionary. You take 8 of these, put them in a group, you've got yourself a contubernium. These men will live, eat, sleep, and fight together to build group solidarity that might help them on the battlefield, because you're more likely to fight harder to save your friends than you are a random, right? If you then take 10 of these contuberniums and make them fight together as a unit, you will have a century, led by a single man known as a centurion. So this is pretty much a Total War sized unit almost. Now you take 6 of these centuries, put them all together, you've got yourself a cohort, my friend, which is basically a small army. Which of course you could get a lot done with this amount of men. But if you really wanted to get shit done, you would bring a legion, which is 10 cohorts. So that is 4,800 men. That's a lot of dudes, and probably not an amount I'm going to be able to reach in this campaign. There was another group though called the Maniple, which was technically a Total War unit of 120 men. This was eventually replaced by the cohort, but it's all over the place over the years. These numbers changed and things, so take this as a rough guideline, but there it is. If you're a history nerd and you've got anything to add here, feel free to drop it in the comments. So I'm making my little 6-unit cohort because that's like 6 centuries, although these are 120 men, so technically they're maniples, but numbers are off, but you get the idea. Now as I'm chilling in one of my recently liberated settlements, a vampirate army seems to be on the way, and they do indeed come at me, so we've got a fight on our hands. I decided to fight this one in a single line formation, as the Romans did occasionally do. They were defeated by this tactic by Hannibal, which they then learned from and used against Hannibal later on. Although not quite in the same way that I'm going to do here, as I do have a larger infantry line than them, I am able to envelop them with my infantry, but I'm also sending my cavalry around there for a big flank as well to disrupt all these missiles and artillery that they have back here. But my boys, charging in, not afraid of zombies. The Romans, of course, very experienced in fighting zombies, as I think they probably fought the Dutch at some point. And of course, they're no match for my well-trained, disciplined Roman soldiers. And our plan is coming along quite nicely. We've got this solid line of boys here, and then the flanking units starting to come round, starting to get behind the enemy lines and envelop them. And of course our infantry crushes theirs with ease, but they've got some big artillery pieces we need to take care of. So Tyrion charges in to take down the undead pirate ship, just as famous Roman Emperor Octavian once did at the Battle of Actium. Google it, I swear it happened. We then come to a few cav charges later in the backs of the infantry, getting that full envelopment, and then a few javelins later, and we have indeed gained victory. And so impressed with our victory to push back the vampirates, Julius Caesar is now available as a regiment of renown. He will surely be a powerful force to help lead our army. Over the next turn, Count Noctilus got word that we now have Julius Caesar on our side and comes begging for peace, which of course I deny him, as I want to destroy his home first. Now, as he has an army over in the east, I bring my armies over there to try and deal with him, but as my cohort, led by my second general Hordan, moves through some forest regions, he hears some strange noises. And just like the Battle of Teutoburg Forest in 9 AD, the Romans are ambushed by the Beastmen. Oh, scheisse! Hordan quickly orders his men to form up 2 lines back to back to prevent his units from being surrounded on all sides, but those beastmen are coming in thick and heavy. The men are ready though, they're braced for the fight of their lives. It's looking tough though, there's Minotaurs on the field, they're coming at us from all angles, they've got missiles. But our Roman discipline stays true, we hold strong, we start to push out to try and get after some of the missiles a little bit. We're holding off the units well though with our sturdy formation, and eventually we're able to outgrind them as they do run away, their leadership breaks, and our boys have taken a fair pounding, but they're still going strong, although there is still some big boys to deal with. Hordan himself goes over to 1v1 the Cygors with the help of some of the braver legionaries eventually, and he is able to survive this ambush, getting most of his men out of there alive. What a lad. My main army has now returned home and I've recruited some better infantry, which I will rename to Principes, and I've also upgraded my spearmen and renamed them Triarii. These are the last important component of my full army alongside Principes and Hastati. More on how they work together in a minute. Hordan then falls his cohort back to Lothan to replenish, and my main army moves up to face the Noctilus army that is on our shores. Now that Vampire Coast army runs off to the east, and I think it's time to take the opportunity to go after that Dreadfleet homeland. The Dreadfleet army then decides to come back towards my province though, but Hordan is there with his cohort defending. I then decide to ask a nearby High Elf faction if they'll join the war against the Dreadfleet, and hey, they'll apparently do it for free, so that's a winner. And it's their lands that the Dreadfleet army happens to be stood in, so it should just be a matter of time. Why can't I fucking reach? The big army inside the Maelstrom settlement came out to fight me, and I was able to get a close victory by auto-resolve, although I did think about fighting it, but when I saw the map, and also the fact that the enemy army had 4 mortars, I decided, no thank you, I will take the auto-resolve. And I also auto-resolved the settlement battle as well, just like the Romans would have done. And with that, the Dreadfleet now had very little land left. Now I brought Hordan and his cohort out to try and help out these elves in getting rid of the Dreadfleet, but along the way I found those son of a bitch beastmen that ambushed me, so I finished them off and wiped them off the face of the earth. Now that we're wrapping things up with the Dreadfleet, I start to send a scout to check out what's going on in our beloved Italia. And not far behind them is my main army ready to invade, and my scout arriving in Italia, which is pretty much modern day Spain, finds a scorched wasteland. So again, just modern day Spain, but as we move closer and closer to Italia, we find vampire pirates have taken over, and that just won't do. I decide to start down south with Sartosa, and then I'll make my way up through the mainland. So we declare our war and begin our siege of Sartosa, which again I'll take as an auto-resolve victory. I'll then push on to Lucini and take that as well, and we are well on our way to reclaiming our precious Italia. But no, there are 2 large Vampire Coast armies in the north, in the capital of the province, who are no doubt going to make their way down here to have a word with me about my recent actions. And that they indeed do on the next turn, but I decide to come out of the settlement and stand in front of it, encamped, ready for the fight. Brave Romans to a man, we'll take them on in a straight-up land battle. Although it seems that some French have arrived here as well. Hopefully they don't declare war on us. I can only deal with 1 detestable people at a time. I'm sorry, I can't help myself, alright? That's 3 European countries insulted. Let's see if we can get a 4th in before the end of the video. And across the next turn, Aranessa does indeed come for us. We're going to need the finest of Roman military tactics to win this one. We are heavily outnumbered, but we shall deploy the Triplex Acies strategy. With this, we'll be deploying 3 lines of melee infantry. The first up will be the Hastati, followed by the Principes, followed by the Triarii. The Hastati were the younger men, the newer recruits, the less experienced, but hungry and able to prove themselves. If you live long enough as a Hastati, you might become a Principe, the more experienced, slightly older men, wealthier, so you probably had better equipment and a better fighting force in theory than the Hastati. And then the final line, the Triarii. These were the elite older boys that were pretty much the last line of defense. If all else failed, the Triarii would get in there. Supporting all this melee infantry would be some skirmishers up front, some velites. They would be lightly armored and just throw javelins. In this case, I've got some heavier boys because they came in my starting army. And all this, as you probably noticed, is formed up in a checkerboard formation or a quincunx. to allow better movement for the units. So when the Hastati have done their fighting and they need to pull back, they can fall back through the gaps nice and easy, and the Principes will then move up. If all goes well, the Triarii might not even need to fight, and they'll just sit back there looking cool. And there was an old Roman saying, res ad triarios venit. It comes down to the Triarii, which typically meant the battle hadn't gone very well if the Triarii needed to get involved. Now in this battle, I've sent my lord and hero out to try and draw some things in, maybe harass a little bit, and my cavalry would normally be supporting the flanks of the infantry, but in this case, I've got a reinforcing army coming, so I'm going to try and slow them down with one of my cavalry units, as they have a bunch of artillery. My hero was able to lead Aranessa straight into my javelins, who do a lot of damage, and she's going to get absolutely destroyed, so a powerful start for us to this battle. Now, Julius Caesar does join us in this battle, and if you've read anything about him, you will have definitely heard that he was very well versed in lizard magic and is able to drop the deliverance of Itza here, although not very well apparently because he's kind of missed, but you know, he's got a lot on his plate, he doesn't have time to practice lizard magic. But as we engage in this battle, the Hastati move up first, trying to form a solid line as much as we can. It's not easy when the AI is coming at us in all kinds of weird formations, but we'll attempt to keep our Roman discipline as much as possible. Julius Caesar getting stuck into the melee. He, of course, very well versed in fighting smelly, slow, disorganized heathens, as he did in Gaul against the Germans. My cavalry is doing their part well, holding back this reinforcing army, just disrupting them and making it hard for them to get to the battle. But as we can see here, the Hastati are in there doing the fighting. The Principes still waiting back though. They're not doing anything yet. They're just chilling, waiting for their time to move up. As the Hastati get more worn down and tired, I will start to pull them back. A lesser known Julius Caesar fact is that he was actually really good at taking down giant crabs, as he's trying to do here. He eventually gets a little help from the Triarii, but it's no problem for him. The Hastati, though, their inexperience in battle is leading them to struggle with crabs, so they're having to fall back, and now is the time for the Principes to move up and take over. So I'm pulling my Hastati units back here. One of them is a little too far gone deep in there, so I'm going to leave them in there, but the Principes moving up to take over the fight now. So this is how the Triple Acies would have worked. The Hastati go in. If they can't win the fight, they'll retreat, and they will have at least softened up the enemy for the Principes. If the Principes can't get it done, then the Triarii will hopefully finish the job. And in this case, the Principes are enough to take down what's left of the Vampire Coast here. The Triarii don't need to get involved. There's a lot of running down all the missile units here, so we're kind of losing our formation a little bit. I do accidentally leave Tyrion fighting some depth guard halberds, so he gets a little messed up, but he does survive. The Principes come over to avenge him, and with wiping all of that out, there is our victory. It's apparently a Pyrrhic victory, but a victory all the same. I then move on to take out the remainders of these two armies. I do fight the battle so that I don't lose this cavalry, but with that, the path is now clear to go ahead and take Riff-Raffa just to the north, although I am going to go back and replenish first. Although not fully, as some of my units are apparently going to die here, so I decide to besiege it for a few turns to wear them down and take the victory that way. And then after a little replenishment, as the coast seems to be clear, I push on to the capital, Miragliano, which is going to become our new capital, the beautiful city of New Rome. It's glorious. But New Rome is not safe yet. There is a dirty, filthy vermin threat just to our west that we must get rid of to ensure the security of New Rome. But before we go after them, I want to capture the rest of Italia, taking out the rest of these Vampire Coast settlements along this eastern coast. But seeing this large army here, I expected to try and go after the ill-defended Lucini, and they do. And of course, I've set an ambush, which I'm going to set up with these two Roman walls closing in on them, crushing them from both sides. There's little they can do with heavy legionaries smashing them in the face from every direction. So of course they don't last long, and we absolutely obliterate that army in probably less than a minute or so, and we're free to push down this eastern coast. They have little defense as we bounce from settlement to settlement here, reclaiming Italia in the name of New Rome. Eventually they do bring a small force down to threaten one of my recently acquired settlements, but I don't want to slow down my main army, so I recruit a new lord, put a hero in with him, and hope that they can defend that settlement from that small army, and keep my main army pushing north to the final settlement of Zvorak. As expected, that new little lord settlement is besieged. I'm going to fight it to try and get that victory and save it. I do manage to win this battle, but it is a bit of a close one with some of their lords and heroes lasting pretty damn well, but we are able to save it and not have to take any backward steps. And with that, our main army is able to keep pushing forward to deal with this final settlement. Another quick, easy auto-resolve here with the power of our Roman army. And there we go. We've done it. We've reclaimed most of Italia. Or at least what I'm calling Italia, because it mildly resembles the shape of Italy, alright? I'm now also going to get peace with Aranessa because she has nothing else I want. I don't need this war anymore, so I'm going to get peace. I'm going to get a non-aggression, and now I can focus on taking out those rat men to ensure the safety of New Rome. Now on our way back towards New Rome, there is this little settlement in the middle of Italia which we need to claim, which is clearly empty, so it should be a nice, easy take. It's just some old ruins, so we could turn that into a nice settlement. Oh, scheisse, there's rats! Looks like our war with the rats is going to come on a little sooner than intended, but we're ready to go. We're going to take this nice and quick, decisive victory, and then we better head over to New Rome quick time before the enemy pushes on from their disgusting little castle in the west. Italy is now nicely united now, though. Lovely. As we return to New Rome, we can see that Skavenblight has a big old army in it as well as its 20 garrison, so there's a lot to take on there, more than one army can probably handle. Luckily, General Hordan has answered our call for reinforcements as he brings an army over to help us out. He's going to attack some of their smaller settlements to the west to try and draw that big army out of Skavenblight. But with Hordan's army, I decided to give him one of the most historically accurate armies going, with 4 units of Praetorian Guard, some of the finest Roman soldiers to ever have lived. He's also got a Scorpion Ballista, because the Romans loved a little bit of artillery. And of course, no Roman army would be complete without, that's right, you've guessed it, dragons. The Romans, well known for their use of dragons in battle. Many famous battles included a dragon or two. Julius Caesar famously said, "I fucking love a good dragon. My favorite is Tommy." And Tommy, of course, the dragon that Julius Caesar rode in the Battle of Alesia. And there's that famous painting of him on Tommy as well, which we've all seen. So dragons certainly appropriate for this army. And of course, you can't have Romans without gladiators. So I've got some of the finest Roman gladiators that were going around as well. These Minotaurs of Rome had some of the best fights in the Colosseum back in the day, so they should do some good work here. Now, unfortunately, for one of my units of Praetorian Guard, they weren't aware that nukes were a thing, and they got slightly blown up by one. But these are Praetorian Guard, so as I say, they're not going to go down easy. It's going to take more than a nuke to get rid of a unit of Praetorian Guard. My Scorpion starts firing back in retaliation, laying waste to a lot of their clumped up infantry. We use this to suppress them a little bit as the rest of the army pushes up. The Praetorian Guard ready to go, the Minotaurs alongside them, the dragons coming in. It's going to be a big rat-crunching fight. Some dragon fire laying waste to rats all over the place as well. And as you can imagine, these rats didn't last long in the face of Rome's finest. A lot of the Skaven units getting routed off pretty quickly. Their leadership not going to stand up to the Minotaurs of Rome and the dragons and the Praetorian Guard. It was just a matter of time until we killed them all off. So as I mentioned, I'm trying to pull that big Skaven army out of its settlement to come over and maybe take on this army, which will leave Skavenblight free for my main army to maybe try and take. But for now, I take this settlement and keep moving towards Skavenblight, and we do manage to pull that big army out of the settlement, but there's another one on the horizon threatening New Rome as I move out of New Rome to go and attack Skavenblight. So I have to come back and defend, of course. We can't let New Rome fall. I'm going to set up an ambush. And I'm going to fall Hordan's army back for now because Magrita has a big old garrison and there's that big army. I won't be able to take both of them on. So I'm going to fall back and try to replenish, although the replenishment is kind of rubbish in this region. Does my ambush come off though? Yes, it does. And it's a particularly nice ambush because their army is comprised of a lot of ranged units, 4 rattling gunners, 2 poison winds, a couple of catapults. So it's just going to be an absolute slaughter. My 2 Roman walls close in again like they did against the Vampire Coast. And the rats and their low leadership aren't going to last long in this situation either. And there's little they can do to defend themselves. Hey, where did that Commoner Cassandora come from? Who did that? So it doesn't take long to lay waste to this Skaven army and protect New Rome and move us closer to taking out Skavenblight. I decide to sail Hordan's army around to our precious homeland so that he can get some better replenishment and we can just attack Skavenblight full frontal with our 2 armies. I end up with a rebellion at that little settlement I took. Some Greek rebels come to claim it back. That's fine with me as long as it's not rats. Now a few turns on and everyone's replenished and ready to go. We're starting our push on Skavenblight. But they do have a few armies knocking around it, so we got to be careful staying in range of the garrison for now. But over the next turn we get an underway interception of one of their small armies. A close victory ought to resolve. It's Hordan's army. I'm going to try and fight it though for a better result. Mostly it's just mowing them down with all the big heavy stuff, trying to get rid of them as quickly as possible. And we don't take too much damage in the process, bar 1 dragon. And that nicely gets rid of 1 small army from near Skavenblight. Finally, though, we're able to begin our march through the swamps to get to Skavenblight. We're in camp stance to protect us from ambushes, and I don't want to use ambush myself because I want to set up a big straight-up fight with these Skaven rats. And as the next turn comes along, it looks like our time is now. We're going to come out of camp stance and attack this smaller army. It's going to be reinforced by this larger army and the garrison. But if we could take out this small army first and then deal with the two larger ones afterwards, that's going to be our best chance because there's a lot of rats to take on here. Looking at the terrain, you can see it's a bit of a weird one for my army and its formation. There is a hilltop though. Maybe I can try to claim that and hold the rats off. Again, we're going to try and use the Triplex Acies formation here. The enemy hold the hill currently at the start of the battle, but we're going to march up there and try to take it off them. Once again, Hastati at the front, Principes in the center, and Triarii at the back. My boys are ready to go. So the enemy holds the hill, and one of their armies is coming in from the north of us, one of them from the east of us, and then my reinforcing army is coming in from the west of us. So I'm going to push up quickly and try to take out this first army, and then form up maybe two lines to create a sort of box on this hill to protect myself from those two reinforcing armies. We've got to move fast though to take that hill, so my javelins start flying, taking down that brood horror and the other single entities in the area as quickly as we can. I once again move my cavalry around the flank. They've got some strong missiles in this starting army, so I'm trying to disrupt those and get rid of those as quickly as possible. I start to move the army up, but things start to get a little bit wonky as we move through some of this terrain. It messes up the formation, so we kind of abandon it, but we push back the enemy quickly as possible as the two reinforcing armies are arriving, so we are running out of time. Many rats are marching their little furry asses up the hill, so we've got to try and form up those lines to protect us from both sides as quickly as possible. And we do manage to get it done just in the nick of time, to be honest. We get the Hastati formed up, we get the Principes formed up, and we got two long lines holding back the hordes of Skaven that are coming for us. And this line here is fully comprised of Hastati. They're holding off the northern army, while the Principes are holding the right-hand side of us, protecting from that eastern army. But we've got plenty of brave Romans to a man, so we're not going anywhere. We're holding them off, as you can see. There's a lot of goddamn rats here, but nothing Romans weren't used to fighting off on the day-to-day. Eventually, some of my reinforcing army units come over. The Minotaurs get stuck in to this eastern army. There is quite a lot of heavy armor in the Storm Vermin, so we're going to need their armor piercing to get through it. My reinforcing army was kind of attacked by some of the northern army, so it meant not too much pressure for the Hastati, but my reinforcing army kind of went all over the place. And here's an aerial view of the situation. You can see us holding one side, holding the other side. Triarii filling in some holes there as well. Once again, some Dragonfire doing some fine work in this battle as well. The Praetorian Guard arrive after a long run uphill from the other side of the map, but that's no bother to them. They're here to take over from the Principes and give them a rest, holding off this eastern side army. And they are the ones to eventually break the assault of this side, pushing back the enemy Storm Vermin and then enveloping the rest. The Praetorian Guard finishing up the fight over on this side. This battle has indeed come down to the Triarii in this situation as well. They've been fighting off Storm Vermin, they've been fighting off Doom Wheels, and even the Hell Pit Abomination, all of which were of course no match for the elite Triarii. So with great resistance and organization, we were able to hold off this large Skaven attack. The Hastati and Principes holding things in place, the Dragons getting the terror routing, the Praetorian Guard coming over to help out, the Minotaurs with the armor piercing. It all came together to get this victory for New Rome. And with that, we are going to go ahead and raise Skavenblight from existence, although I am going to come back and capture it later, just in case the Skaven try to take it again. But with that, we have secured the borders of our precious homeland and protected New Rome. And the Roman Empire in the Warhammer world will no doubt live a long and happy life for the rest of time, just like in real life. And there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. If you want more of this kind of stuff, I got a couple of these here. You could check them out if you wish. Shout out to the Rome mod I used in this video as well. I'll link it in the description if you wish to take a look. Thanks to all the patrons who support this channel. Thanks to all the Europeans for being the butt of my jokes. I'll see you in the future.